Welcome back to Bullet Catcher Gaming. This is, of course, Recon Breakpoint. I have a very special guest with me today. It is Jeremy, and Jeremy runs and owns the website dangerclosedigital.com. Jeremy is also on the Discord. You might recognize him if you're on there as Tyrant Slayer 01. If you are not a member of the Discord, please feel free to join us. The link is in the description below. It's also on the front of the channel. So, Jeremy's website, dangerclosedigital.com. Jeremy, tell us a little bit about what your website is.
Thanks for having me on, Andy. My name is Jeremy. I do tactical photography. You can see my work at dangerclosedigital.com. I work with manufacturers, trainers, and small business owners whose businesses revolve around the Second Amendment.
Fantastic. Brilliant. I've had a look at your website. It's amazing. If you're looking at the thumbnail, or you looked at the thumbnail today, that's all Jeremy's work. He gave us the, let us use some of his amazing pictures. So we put a few together to use as a thumbnail. Thank you very much for that. And Jeremy and I have been talking quite a lot in the last few weeks. And I wanted to do a Gunsmith video. And I thought Jeremy was the person to get on and discuss the Gunsmith and the improvements that we could see in the Gunsmith. We've had loads of comments from people on the Discord. Actually, some really in-depth comments from people on the Discord. So thank you for that. And on the YouTube channel as well. So we thought, this would be the way to go. So, Jeremy, how many weapons do you actually own? It's a lot, isn't it?
I own quite a few. Somewhere in the 70s, maybe 72 firearms. But yeah, nice. I own quite a few. Yep.
Okay, so you know what you're doing with them. You photograph them. You do bits and bobs with them. So, and obviously you film them. But I know you fire them a lot as well. So you're the ideal person to have on. You know what you're doing. So, okay, let's jump straight in. So, one of the biggest things that people obviously ask for the most is the ability to be able to put any attachment on any rail. It's probably the number one thing that comes up in the Gunsmith. I mean, why do you think that they don't do this? Is there any reason for it? Or do you think it's just because?
I think it's just because. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I think it's because they're trying to do some play balancing. Because not only do I do the photography and build the guns and work those, but I'm an active game player, and Ghost Recon is my number one game that I play. So I understand what people are asking for, and I know sometimes the answer isn't what people want to hear. But not all rails support all attachments. It really depends on the rail. So, if they want different attachments on the rail, then perhaps we should have the ability to choose a different handguard, aka rail, in the game itself. And then the attachments that qualify for that particular rail would become available.
That makes total sense, to be honest. So what you're saying is that you shouldn't be able to switch everything. So everything with the Picatinny rail, for example, should be able to take something with, I mean, I know that there are certain things that I've seen some funny memes out there where people talking about Breakpoint and the weapon attachments, and it's got like pistols with a 203 grenade launcher on the bottom of it and things like that. I mean, I don't think anyone actually wants to see that. I don't know, maybe they do, but there's so many restrictions. I think that's what frustrates people. Why are there certain rifles that you cannot put a 203 on, even though it has a Picatinny rail on it? I mean, that's the thing I think that frustrates people the most. But there you go. That was a good explanation that you've given about some of the reasons as to why they may not. So what about damage ratio? This is another thing that comes up. So should it be, so for example, whatever the damage ratio is for a specific round, should it be the same for the next rifle in that caliber. So an example of that, a 5.56 NATO in an M4A1, should it be doing the same damage as a 5.56 NATO on a 5.16?
Well, the easy answer to that, with everything being equal, the answer would be yes. If the barrel lengths are the same, then they should have the same muzzle velocity when they come out. And of course, if they're using the same exact round. So it really would depend on the length of the barrel itself.
So if the barrels are different lengths, so for example, some of the scout options that you have in the game are longer barrels, then, and even if, so two different weapons both using a 5.56 should effectively, if you've got one with a shorter barrel and one with a longer barrel, the damage should be different.
Yes, not only the damage, but the accuracy as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you on that one. So what you're saying is, as long as you're using exactly the same length of barrel, say you're using a 10-inch barrel on a 5.56, doesn't matter what the weapon, the accuracy and damage should be the same.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, there you go. So that's something then, because, I mean, have you noticed yourself, you play the game a lot, have you noticed any specifics that are really badly wrong? I mean, there are loads, but are there any that particularly bother you?
I can't think of any directly off the top of my head that in particular stand out. But I do know that most of the rifles that are comparable to each other in barrel length and ammunition type, they vary pretty wildly. I'm of the opinion that Ubisoft does it more as this rifle carries these particular benefits, rather than this is a real world representation of how these rounds would perform out of this barrel.
Okay. That's fair enough. So one of the other things that comes up now, some people might say this is not Gunsmith related. I'd probably say it is Gunsmith related, but hopefully you'll put me straight on this if I'm wrong. Bullet drop. See, for me, bullet drop should be Gunsmith related because it's all about the weapon that you're using and you're customizing the weapon in the Gunsmith. The bullet drop in the game, let's be totally frank, is bad. It's not good. An M4A1 in real life should be pretty much pinpoint accurate at, say, 200 yards with iron sights. In the game, it is not. Do you think that Gunsmith should be the way to fix that, or do you believe that's more the mechanics that they've built into the shooting?
Oh, well, my answer to that would actually be a little bit of both. I think it's built into the mechanics of the shooting because there's a hard stop on the rendering system as far as how far out you can actually see the target. So they kind of dumbed down the guns a bit. So that's kind of the mechanics. But on the gunsmith side, that's absolutely part of the gunsmith side. Because your barrel length does make a difference in how accurate it is, how much spin it puts on the bullet. A 7-inch barrel does not put nearly as much spin on the bullet as a 12-inch or a 16-inch would. More spin means more stability and flight for that bullet, and the farther and straighter it's going to go.
Okay, that's a nice answer actually. That makes a lot of sense. So there's some footage showing in the background right now of when you were talking about render distance. I mean, I know some other people may say that that's not necessarily Gunsmith related. Now, in Wildlands, the render distance, off the top of my head, you can quote me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 2.3 kilometers, I think. And I'm not talking about looking down the sight and being able to see the person. I'm talking about the fact, the actual distance where you could kill someone from. very early days of the channel, we did a very small video where we tried to break a record of the longest distance, and I believe we hit 2.3. As you're watching right now, we tried it in Breakpoint, and we actually did. I think it was 2.3. This was several months ago. This footage that we did this, where we just did testing for days and days and days and days, trying to get this right, and it's all over the place. I mean, literally, we tried so many different variants, and every single time it changed. Very frustrating. We were getting direct shots in the head at 2.3 with holding an enemy soldier, and it just didn't register the kill at all. And we were actually seeing the shots. People say that the shots disappear after 1.1 kilometers, and that's not true. They don't. This was not on PC. This was on console, and we could see the shots coming in well over 2.3, but we just couldn't kind of hone them in on target. It takes a long time. It took us hours to put some of this together. What do you think? Because obviously it goes into the conversation where people are saying we really would like to see times 10 sights, for example. Well, what's the point of a times 10 sight if when you look down, the enemies are not rendering past, say, 800 meters? I mean, what do you think on that?
Well, from a technical standpoint, I would say that when you look through the optic and you have a 10 times magnification scope, rather than trying to draw from your current location to a faraway location at 10 times, I would say start at the faraway, the target, and then come back and bring the field of view that the game would render back to the 10 times mark so that you can actually see it. It's obvious that, because as you said in your video there, you're hitting the target, it's just not actually doing anything. So obviously the target exists at the other end of the rifle. You're just not able to see it. So they're gonna have to figure out some means of drawing smaller versions of the target through the optic, and that's kind of hard to explain without getting into resolutions and things like that as far as computer graphics go. But there is going to be a hard set limit as to how far they can render out things, because at some point they're going to be smaller than the size of a single pixel on the screen at that particular distance.
Yeah, I think there's a few places on the game you can hit about a 950, but you've got to have set it up perfectly. Tends to be if you're at a more elevated level, looking down upon a target, you can sometimes reach those distances, but there's not much over that. And I'm sure there will be some people who will say, I have got a longer one than that. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm talking about it's not much further than that for definite. I mean, there might be a few people with a 1.1 or a 1.2 or something like that, but I can't see there being much more than that. I've seen a few videos on YouTube with people saying that they hit a 3.8 kilometer sniper kill and then showing off their, the page where, it shows your statistics. That, oh, look, it's true. I don't believe that. And I'm not going to start knocking anybody, but it's just not true because it's impossible. What they've done is that they've fired, that they've shot the round, and then they show a dead body afterwards with a friend holding the body. They don't show the body falling down or the distances between the two people. And then they go and show that statistics screen. But that doesn't mean anything because you can kill anybody with C4 and fly off and explode it and be 4 kilometers away and it will register as 4 kilometers. So that doesn't mean that you've shot someone. You could have killed them with C4. But anyway, getting off topic there. But it just
or the person who was recording the other end of the video shot them.
True, but then it wouldn't register on the first person's screen. It would
Oh
only
yeah, I
register
suppose.
on their
Yeah.
screen. But anyway, I digress. So what about a lot of people obviously talk about gunsmiths in other games. Now, I play Modern Warfare quite a bit. People talk about Tarkov and how in depth that is. Do you think that Breakpoint, that's what they should be going for? So effectively, you can customize absolutely every single part of your weapon, literally almost take it apart and put it back together again, kind of where Tarkov is not far off of that. Do you think they should be looking at that? Or do you think you'd be happy if it was just more down the lines of where Wildlands was?
I think most people expect what Wildlands was. Until the argument started being made for Tarkov, Wildlands was the bar by which most people was measuring Breakpoint against. And I have a weird opinion on this. I think it should be the halfway point between what people are asking for, which is absolute control, and what it currently sits. Because if you get too far into the weeds of some of this stuff, some of these things, depending on how they implement them, have a great effect on how your weapon's going to perform. So if you go too far into the weeds, you maybe have people put things on there that probably they shouldn't, and actually negatively affecting their gun. And then you're just going to end up with people that are complaining that their gun doesn't shoot as well with all the buttons and stuff pressed that they could possibly press. So I think they need to do a happy medium. I don't think they're that far off with the current Gunsmith. I don't agree with going right down to the firing pin for customization. I think most people's desire for customization, in the majority of people's desire for customization, is mostly in the visual realm, not so much the performance. So there are a few of us. I get in the weeds on it a little bit, but there's at some point you need to stop. But also, it won't fit well into the game as far as being that in depth with a single aspect of the game.
No, that's fair enough. That's a good point. Just so people know, we're not going to be going into depth regards to the things that we want added into the Gunsmith. This is more about how to fix the current Gunsmith, some of the issues that people bring up that they would like to see. So we've recently made a video about attachments and optics we'd like to see in the game. And in that, we went into thermal scopes and canted sights and hand guards and all that kind of stuff. Now, what we're going to do is we haven't done a kind of feedback video based off of that yet. So what we'll do is we'll take the feedback from this and we'll take the feedback from that one. And I'll put a further video together and get Jeremy on for that, where we can kind of go through everybody's feedback regards to the actual things that they want in the game, the types of, extras and scopes and stuff like that. Otherwise, this video will go on forever if we talk about the kind of wish list that people want of things added in. But actually, talking of kind of handguards, that is something that lots of people do bring up. What's your take on handguards? I know you mentioned it briefly at the beginning. What kind of like tactical variants for the handguard and things like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think if you have too many handguard styles, you end up with licensing issues, and then some people will try to put on a gun that doesn't support it, like trying to put an AR-15 rail onto an AK-47. But I do think that for that class weapon, if you're going to have two different lengths of barrel, short and standard, I think you should have two different lengths of rail that you can select from as well. And then you could select the visual style for the attachments. Picatinny, 1913 Picatinny rail, M-Lock, key mod, and there's a host of really custom ones out there too. But I would say those three in two different lengths, I think, would probably be fine.
What about things like hand stop grips or C-clamp grips?
Are you asking my opinion of whether they should?
Yeah. Do you think that's something that should be added on there? I mean, like, you know, I know that a lot of people talk about, the pistol grips on all rifles should be customizable. So, do you think that we should go that deep?
I don't think it's necessary. I think it would be fairly easy to implement, and it would be a crowd pleaser if they did it. But unless that rifle's on your back, that grip's going to be in your hand most of the time, so it doesn't hold a lot of weight with me. So it's going to be covered.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the magazines. Magazines get brought up quite a lot. You and I have discussed the magazines in length. People talk about wanting different magazines, which I think I did cover in that other video. What about there are issues with the magazines in this game, aren't there?
Yes.
If you, I'll just leave it for you to discuss, because you even taught me a few things on this which I was unaware of. So tell us about the issues that are currently wrong with the magazines in the game.
Well, there are issues, and I think I know why there are issues, and I'll explain that along with it. There are almost all the magazines hold the incorrect amount of rounds for their type. For instance, the extended mags in the game for the majority of AR platform style guns are actually Surefire 60, and they hold 60 rounds instead of 50. And then, for instance, the 416 Shorty has an extended magazine. That's actually a Magpul PMag 40 that holds 40 rounds and not 50. So they've gone over 10 on one and under 10 on the other. I think they do it for play balancing. They may also do it for simplicity in the code, as far as knowing when they do reload how many rounds you go back into that, not necessarily tie it to the magazine. But nonetheless, if you're putting these things in there and you want to have a realistic experience, then they should be putting the correct magazine size. Not only the magazine size, but a Staynag mag defines how big the dimensions of the magazine well. So if I can put a 30-round Staynag mag into an AR-15, and I should be able to take that same magazine and put it into a DMR AR-15, because a DMR is nothing but an AR-15 that's been accurized with a longer barrel, a more precision barrel, and then a longer range optic. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you could take the lower off of a DMR and swap it with an AR-15, and they would work just fine. Yeah, so the lower is what defines what magazine it's going to take, and there's just no reason that a DMR couldn't hold a 20, 30, or 60 round magazine.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that people obviously want different types of mags as well. We covered that in the other video. So we'll discuss that more when we do a follow-up. So let's have a talk about suppressors for the minute. Now, obviously, outside of what I just said, then people wanting more types. Do you think a suppressor should be available on every weapon, excluding the grenade launcher, maybe the Sharp Thunder and the Bosch G12? Other than that, do you think we should be having a suppressor on everything? It kind of goes back to that very first question about putting everything on anything.
I feel that if the weapon in real life has a commercial suppressor option for it, that they should offer a suppressor for it. You're going to get some of these unusual ones where you can say, well, I've seen it suppressed. Well, you may have seen it suppressed, but it was customized. It's not a normal thing. But I think for the most part, as a sweeping generalization, yes, you should be able to put suppressors on anything that in real life would support them.
Okay. Now, another thing that comes up regularly, now, some people once again may say, well, this is probably not Gunsmith. It's probably more to do with how they would make the game and how they'd have to implement this possibly in a slightly different way. But what about armor piercing or subsonic or maybe even tracer rounds and adding them in to Breakpoint within the Gunsmith where you could choose what you were going to use? Do you think that would be an implementation that would work, or do you feel maybe not so much?
Well, I think it would work with some caveats, of course. If you select armor-piercing rounds, you're not going to carry 50 armor-piercing rounds and 250 regular rounds. You would just have armor-piercing rounds all the time. That does play into it. The concept of different types of rounds, in my opinion, actually already exists in the game. In particular with the suppressors, when you put the suppressor in your rifle, or any firearm, actually, when you put a suppressor on there, it does I think it's 20% damage reduction. Is it 20% or just 20? But the damage reduction, I believe. I'm trying to make excuses for the game here, but I believe the damage reduction comes from the fact that you are now shooting subsonic rounds through that suppressor, which do not have as high of feet per second coming out, because they're traveling slower than the speed of sound so that they don't make a crack when they come out. Part of how a suppressor works. And when you don't have that feet per second, you're not going to have the same kinetic energy at the end when it strikes its target. So I can see where they could say 20% less damage. However, I think they should specify that when you put a suppressor on, you automatically shoot subsonic ammunition.
Okay, that's fair enough. Do you think... Now, I did a little bit of research on this, but I didn't really come up with anything solid, if I'm honest. There's information out there that says that Breakpoint had a military advisor. Now, obviously, we don't know who this person is. If anyone does know who it is, put it down in the comments, because I don't know who it is. I'm not here to bash someone or whatever. Do you think the game's Gunsmith would benefit from having, for example, someone like yourself or someone who is a proper military advisor? Do you think that would help? I mean, I know Wildlands had military advisors, more than one, I believe. Do you think it would make sense if they brought people in who have hands-on with multiple different firearms, someone like yourself? Do you think that would make a difference and it would improve a gunsmith?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely believe so. They don't even have to be a military advisor. You just need a ballistics expert, and they will tell you what effects each of these variables on your constructed weapon will make on the ballistics of your weapon. So ballistics as in how much kinetic energy they have when they strike, aka damage. Their maximum distance, how long it takes for the bullet to travel from the end of your barrel to the target. These are all things that a ballistics expert could sit down and tell them quite easily. It would probably be only a single day or two of sitting down with a ballistics expert, and they could have most of the stuff hammered out fairly simply.
Yeah, because you would think very early in the game's build, let's say, for example, they are building a sequel to Wildlands. I'm not saying they are, but let's hope they are. Perhaps I'd like to see one. Let's say they were right now. So let's say they're in the early stages and they were to bring someone like yourself in. I think by you telling them, look, if you're going to put in a scope that does times 10, times 8 or something like that, then you're going to need to be able to see enemies at this distance. Then they would make sure that is put in right at the beginning, and we wouldn't have issues where, you are looking down at an enemy base from 900 kilometers out on low ground, and that it looks like the base is empty because nobody would render in. I mean, those kind of issues, they would know that they needed to fix that so people would render in better. Because they render in better on Wildlands. So I don't understand. This is a newer game. I know it's a variation of the same engine, but, 2 different studios did make it. So I don't really understand. I agree with you. I think it would help massively to get the right military advisors or ballistics experts in to help with the development of the game. Let's go on to pistols. So personally, I think sometimes the pistols are underutilized. I'm not sure there's definitely not a good enough selection at the moment. I don't think it's a good enough selection of most of the weapons. Probably assault rifles is a decent one, but there's still so many good ones missing. Like I said, we'll go into that on another video. But pistols, for example, we need more optics on the pistols and maybe some red dots as well. What do you think?
Well, I personally think the red dots is pretty well served in the game already. However, the optics on handguns has become so accepted that I hate to say the norm because they are expensive and a lot of people don't have them, but they are not uncommon. So I would love to see miniature red dot optics on pistols at some point. It's very realistic. It's representative of the real world, and a lot of competition shooters and shooters with accuracy records use these things. So there's obviously advantages to having them.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's a good idea. So most military units in the world will probably use barrels that are, 10 to 12 inches, do you think, roughly?
For a pistol?
No, for a rifle.
For a rifle. Yes.
Is that about the average?
Well, I would say the average is going to be 16 inches, and that's your standard carbine length barrel.
Okay, so would it be right then that going back from something that you were talking about slightly earlier in terms of different barrel lengths? So if they made most of the assault rifles in and around that, and then did variants or brought in some other rifles that had shorter barrels, we should be seeing drastic differences, shouldn't we, in how they perform? Because one of the things that I see more than anything regards to weapons is that people feel like all the guns just don't feel any different to each other. Do you think that's why they feel the same? Because regardless of the barrel length, the accuracy is okay. It is going to be a bit different because we do the weapons test videos and they are different. The recoil is different, but I do get what people are saying. They're not different enough. What do you think?
Well, that's a hard one to address. It really depends on the round that you're shooting, how they should feel, combined with the length of the barrel. So a 16-inch 7.62 by 39 AK barrel with an AK round is going to have more weight behind it when you fire a round through it than a 16-inch 5.56 found on most common M4s. It's a larger round. It has different bullet weight. It has different powder that drives it. So yeah, there should be some difference. I don't know if people are comparing the differences between two rifles of the same category, or if they're saying there's not enough difference between 7.62 and 5.56. Can you clarify that?
What? Say that again. Sorry.
I don't know if people are comparing different types of bullets to each other and saying that they don't feel different relative to each other.
To be honest, the information's probably not. I haven't. People are literally just saying all the weapons feel the same. I presume they're not talking about shotguns compared to pistols and things like that. They're talking probably about most of the assault rifles feel similar. Most of the shotguns feel similar, that kind of thing.
Well, for the same barrel length and the same round, they should feel similar.
And that makes sense. And that means, in a way, that's kind of right from what you're saying. It's kind of correct.
That's correct. Yep.
They've actually got that bit right.
Yes.
You and I were talking the other evening, and we were saying that at the moment, if you use specific weapons and things, you get very minor perks. And we're not talking about gear score perks here, because most players, I believe, don't tend to use gear score. They use immersive mode. But we were talking about, like, for example, how about if you were using a CQB weapon, that you would get, say, a 10 plus on maneuverability because of obviously the size of the weapon, but then maybe a minus 10 in terms of range and accuracy, whereas it might be different if you were using a DMR, then your accuracy would go up and your maneuverability would go down. Because, and I know that obviously the statistics in the game do show that at the moment, but the statistics are definitely all over the place. I mean, we talked about this before. I believe it's there's certain weapons in the game that are just kind of broken. Especially, we talked about it in the bugs and bug fixes video. The Paladin 9 sniper rifle. I mean, we tested that thoroughly, and that was taking 26 shots to take down a helicopter in the game, and that's crazy considering most of the others are about 2 to 3.
Yeah, I agree. That does sound pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's not accurate, is it? I mean, it should no way it should be that off.
No, they shouldn't be that off as far as each other. Full disclosure, I've never shot down a helicopter, so I don't know how many shots it should take.
Go out there and do it.
Right, give me a lot of trouble.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
But I'm not sure exactly how much damage these things should do against the various machinery. I've also seen vehicles on the road blow up with 2 rounds of 50 BMG. So I do know that the vehicle will catch on fire after several rounds. I have shot ground vehicles with a 50 BMG before, and they do catch on fire. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've done some ground vehicles with the M82 Cerebrus in one shot. I believe I've taken some out in one. But that's interesting actually, because it brings me, what you were just talking about there kind of brings me on. Another thing that they need to change is we need the correct ammunition type for the correct weapon. Because at the moment, the 50 cals in the game are not firing 50 cal, are they?
No, most of the 50 kills in the game are actually firing 338 Papua.
Why do you think they did that?
Oh, there's a whole range of reasons for it. It could be they probably have lookup tables for damage versus bullet type. They probably needed to add another table for another bullet type, but they just didn't bother doing it, so they said, well, 338's close enough.
Do you think this was to do with the gear score? Do you think this could have been to do with the balancing of the game? Because they looked at it down the road, knew that there were going to be multiple raids and things like that, and they tried to balance the weapons out a bit.
I think most of the issues with the Gunsmith revolve around play balancing, to be honest.
Right, okay.
Including that, to be clear, yes.
Yeah. So what we'd really like to see then, and what would probably fix the Gunsmith in a lot of people's eyes, would be to have a weapon that you could break down more. You could choose the barrel length, which would then increase the accuracy of the weapon or decrease the accuracy of the weapon, depending on the barrel you had on, instead of giving us a specific weapon and then another variant of it in a DMR class. That would really fix a lot of issues for people, wouldn't it? As well as obviously adding new items. Do you think that would fix the issues for a lot of people?
I think that would placate the majority of users out there. Either the users who are looking for more realistic statistics on their firearms, and I think it would also placate the people who are looking for more visual variants on their firearms. I think you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone with that.
And another thing, and this is a personal annoyance of myself, and I know other people, why why do you think that there are weapons that you can't attach a maul to, even though the rail is there?
Again, I think it's play balance.
You think?
Play balance. Yep.
Because, for example, I remember you never used to be able to put the maul on the Coblin, and then they changed it so you could. But then they haven't done that on other weapons. I know that there were some Gunsmith updates where the last 2 Gunsmith updates we got, that they did add, multiple trigger options where certain weapons only had single shot or didn't have burst fire. I know that they changed that and they did add some more, but all of these weapons should have that, shouldn't they, in real life? And I know you were talking about this with me the other day.
Yeah, absolutely.
They shouldn't just have burst fire and single shot. You were saying that they should have proper semi-auto as well, weren't you?
Yes. I think they should offer variations of semi-automatic, burst, and fully automatic. So out of those 3, you could get up to 7 different variations. But I would love to have just a semi-auto trigger all the time and not have to worry about switching back and forth. While I'm fumbling with my controller, because I get in a lot of combat, while I fumble with my controller, I accidentally knock mine out of semi-auto, because I play semi-auto primarily. I'll knock it into full auto, and all of a sudden I'm shooting bursts when I didn't mean to. And sometimes, that does have a very negative effect, because a lot of times I run semi-auto because I'm making shots with an ASR that a lot of people would normally do with a DMR. So if I throw one round, and I also play unsuppressed most of the time, if I throw one round unsuppressed, the odds of my getting caught on the base from putting a solitary round downrange is far lower than if I threw a burst of 3 to 5 rounds downrange. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I would like to just not have to worry about what my trigger is set to. I want a semi-auto trigger. That's that. Just on my head.
I find a lot of the DMRs are lacking some of the options that we just talked about. You either get one or the other, and that frustrates me personally. I love DMRs, but I tend to not use them because of that that those options are not there.
Right. Well, see, another thing is, as I said before, a DMR is nothing more than a more accurized version of its ASR equivalent. For instance, the 416. There's different variations of the 416 in the game. There are DMR variations, and there are ASR variations. Once you add the ability to change the handguard and the barrel length, it kind of negates the DMR category altogether. So your ASR would be considered a DMR once you add some of these accurizing items to it. So in that sense, anything that lower receiver, like the trigger pack on an AR-15, there's no reason you couldn't put a full auto trigger in a DMR. There's no reason that you couldn't put a semi-auto trigger into an ASR. No, totally with you. Okay, so the video doesn't go on forever. We'll get on to our last few points. And like I said, we are going to do a follow-up video based on your feedback from this and the other video. Now, one of the things that is quite interesting is about refilling your ammo as well. You came up with an interesting idea about when you enter the bivouac, didn't you? And I liked this idea about when you enter the bivouac, you refill your ammo on the way in, when really you should be refilling your ammo on the way out. That's correct. That's actually a flaw in the game. That's an issue. So I mean, if you go into bivouac and you have a 416 which shoots a 5.56 round, and you switch over to an ARX 200 which shoots a 7.62, when you go into that, it just refills the 5.56 rounds because you went into it holding the 416. But when you come out with the ARX 200, it doesn't do anything to the rounds. You're left with whatever you had in your inventory prior.
Yeah, and that it shouldn't work that way, should it? But it does, and we just kind of get used to it, don't we? We just kind of go, oh yeah, that's how it works. But it shouldn't work
There's
like
two
that.
ways you can do it. You can leave it the way that it is right now and refill it when you go into bivouac. However, you refill every category that you have. Or you can refill it on the way out and just refill the caliber that you have currently in your hand.
I agree. Totally agree. Well, we've covered some things about how we could improve the Gunsmith, some of the things that don't work currently, how they may get fixed. Like I said, we're not going to go into the wish list of all the different scopes and things like that because the video will go on for too long. We'd rather get your feedback first and then address that later. But I am going to ask you one question because it's the one that gets brought up the most and it is on the wish list. Flashlights. Would you like to see flashlights in the game? Because so many people do. Would you like to? That also would, to me, would open up. You need more attachment options, because you should be able to choose where you want these things on your gun, not put there automatically as the Gunsmith currently does. Or would you prefer something like the illuminator on the PEQ? So effectively, if you've got your night vision on, you can see the illuminator on and working. Or do you think flashlights, like a good old flashlight, would work better?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. I don't see any reason why you couldn't have an illuminator, a flashlight, and a designator like the PEQ. There are 4 sides to the rail. The underside obviously is in Breakpoint parlance used for underbarrel systems. However, you got the left, right, and the top rail. So there's no reason you couldn't have a PEQ sitting on the top rail with the flashlight sitting on the left, and maybe a can opener on the right, or whatever you think you might need on the right side. But there is rail space there. There's real estate there to put additional items on, and they don't use it. Some of that may break down into how would you set up the controls for all that. I mean, if you've got 3 different items, you could have a rangefinder, a PEQ, and a flashlight on your rail. Now, how would you turn each one of those on and off individually? That's the question.
I'm sure they could work that out. I mean, they could do a one-click thing, where you then press left, right, up, down, whatever. I don't think that would be hard for them to utilize it. Other games have done it, so I don't see why they couldn't. But sure. I was just intrigued to see what you wanted. But like I said, we're not going to go into all the wish list as, we know the kind of things that people want covered, and we did cover them in that other video, things that we want to see. But there you go. Are there any other things that you can think of that would improve the Gunsmith if they could be added right now, or if it was going to be made for a future title, things that you think that were missing, or things that you would like to be able to customize or change or anything like that?
Well, the one big change I would like to see is not so much of a focus on play balancing. In the real world, an unfair advantage is just called an advantage. So, no command is going to come to you and say, look, that weapon that you're using is just, it's far too efficient. It's unfair to the enemy. We're not going to use it. That just never happens. The more efficient you can make these firearms, the better off you're going to be and the better warrior you're going to be. So if they could just ignore the play balancing, or have 2 sets of rules, play balancing for PvP and non-play balancing for PvE, that would be fine too. But from my observations, most people play PvE. Play balancing isn't really necessary on PvE, especially with the number of enemies that you face, plus also the resilience that the enemies tend to have. I don't think there's anything wrong with letting these items that you can attach to your firearms be free and just run with whatever they set up.
And I'm completely with you on that. And for me, the best way to address that is to make the enemy AI a lot better. If your weapons are more powerful, then make the enemy AI better, that they can kill you easier, spot you easier, but just not spot you in the middle of the night when you're standing behind a rock and they're 200 meters away. They seem to be able to use X-ray vision on you, because that's annoying. They definitely need to fix that, but we're not here to talk about that. But there you go. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you coming on. I love your knowledge and your passion for guns as well is great. And please, the link for the website is in the description below. Please, please, please head on over there. The link for Jeremy's YouTube channel as well is you do some live streams and things like that, don't you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I do mostly. I do single elite missions by myself, doing different personal challenges, and then I do a lot with teammates as well. So we do a lot of teammate live streaming.
Okay, well, that will also be in the link in the description as well. So go and check that out. Give him some love. And like I said, hop onto the Discord if you want to have a chat with him, because he's on there and he's always talking on there, and so am I. So hop on, have a conversation with us. If you've got any great ideas for the Gunsmith, please put them in the comments below. And what we'll do is on a video down the line in a week or so, we will discuss those comments, things that you bring up, and we'll talk about them. And Jeremy will go through those. If they're a good idea, bad idea, that kind of thing. But yeah, Jeremy, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Andy.
No worries. And like I said, please check out that website. It is fantastic. Honestly, some amazing photography. Very talented guy. But yeah, stay safe out there, everybody. And until the next one, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.